Good morning. So here we are, bright sunny morning, and we're starting a new series on the book of Job. That's for my wife, because I always say, I'm going to go read Plato and Socrates, and she just drives her nuts. So we are going to start the book of Job, but I thought since at this time of the taping, this series coming on the tails of the election in the U.S. and setting aside whether the election is correct or not, I'm going to leave that up to the legal experts. But there's a question, how do we live our lives now? How do we live our lives? No matter which side of the aisle you're on, if you are embracing this change and celebrating, or you're on the other aisle and you have other words you would use, the point that I'm going to make, I think, is still relevant regardless. I emphasize the fact that change again, I use the phrase again, because history is replete with instances of where things have changed significantly on an international level and a regional level. And the question still is, then how do we live? How do we live? In fact, Nancy Percy, one of my favorite authors, wrote a series, How Do We Live? And then another one, How Do We Live Now? With Chuck Colson. So if you're on the side of the aisle, like I said, that's celebrating, what I'm going to say still applies. And if you're on the other side of the aisle, and maybe you feel things, it's just falling apart, and now is the time to come behind the walls of the church and hide, maybe even take the perspective of, let's just ride it out until we're out of here. You know, I would politely and gently rebuke you, because no matter which side of the aisle, no matter when in history Christians have been, the mandate to go into all the world still applies. That hasn't changed. But it isn't where, okay, things are bad, so we're just going to focus on our stuff. No, that's not just it. It also, we are to go out and bring hope, love, and most of all, truth. Truth. Even when the culture doesn't want it, when the culture hates it, when the culture sets its sights and going the other way, we are still to bring hope, love, and truth. So I'm saying we are to be proactive, not reactive. We are to be on the offense, not the defense. And I'm not speaking violent military action here. I'm talking truth. Christians are not to be apologetic. Well, you have a degree in apologetics. Not the same thing. We don't apologize for what we believe, but we are graceful and reverent and kind and gracious, but yet firm in what we believe. Why? Because it's true. You should not retreat from the truth. Yes, like I said, there's a way to communicate truth. My one daughter once said, Dad, people just need to know they're stupid. Well, I said, hon, you can express it in a different way. No, Dad. Okay, all right. Yeah, you're stupid and your mother dresses you funny. Not always needed to be said. Okay, so what does all that have to do with the book of Job? Well, if we're to go out in hope and love and truth, then what we bring out there should be true and should not just be pie in the sky feel goodness, right? A person who does not share your view will not change their view just because you make it look really nice. Okay? I personally object to when we sell Jesus like a used car salesman only talk about love and only talk about how he's wonderful. And if you come to Jesus, all your problems will go away. This is not true. And this is not the bulk of what Jesus is about. Yes, he's about love, surely, but he's about truth. The thing is, unlike me, Jesus could speak to a woman at the well, tell her the truth about herself, and she said, "Thank you." I told my one daughter, she's a great salesperson, that she could sell water to an Eskimo. What does that do? I don't know, it popped in my head. But anyways, that's the type of person Jesus was. He had that ability to communicate, but he communicated truth. So we're going to be going at the book of Job with this in my. Yeah, I rent my lips here. With this in mind, is the book of Job true and real? That's an important question because of its implications. So, think about this idea when it comes to asking if the book of Job is true and real. Is there anything about the book of Job that speaks to the question of whether it's true and real? Is there anything in there that would make you wonder if it's true or real? Well, Christians are allowed to wonder if something is true in the church. What? Yes, secretly. You can't admit to it openly, or we write you down in a register, and then it comes up on a special website. No, I'm kind of joking. You are allowed to question. So is there anything in the book of Job that you can think of that might lead to it being questioned as if it's true and real? What do you think?
Wait, say that again?
Is there anything in the book of Job that could lead to one questioning if it's true, if it's real?
What's true?
The book of Job.
What's in the Bible?
It's in the Bible. Okay. What does that mean?
It's true. Because Jesus said so.
Okay. Actually, I like half of what you said, because Jesus said so. Credibility, source credibility, is a way to determine truth. Really? Yeah, we have a whole court system built on it. Witness testimony. This is actually a novel idea in history, where you actually have witnesses and you get to cross-examine them. And where did that come from? Ooh, there's a good question. Came from the TV show Law and Order, of course. Do you know they had Law and Order in England or UK? I enjoyed it because they wore those white wigs. And I had a friend from that area, and he explained that the reason they wore white wigs is because that's for capital crimes. Non-capital crimes, they didn't wear them. Okay. Rabbit trail. Anything else? What about anything else in the book of Job? Use your imagination that might lead someone to say, I don't think this has really happened.
How about chapter 1?
What about chapter 1?
Just the way it's portrayed. There's a lot of discussion and debate around it, and typically when that happens, it causes people to wonder, like, okay, wait a minute.
Okay. That's good, Andrew. A lot of debate causes people question. What debate? About what?
Satan was in the presence of God. I'm not really learned on it. I wasn't a Christian in a couple of years. So I don't know.
Gets
The fact that God would give Satan the power over Job.
great.
Things.
Yes.
God's usually in control of all that, but he gave Satan control over Job. And the fact that Job still never cursed him, no matter what he went through, he never, that is hard for any human. If somebody put me through that, I would probably not
Oh, but then that's debated from the standpoint, what was her motive? Maybe she was being compassionate. You know, like every time my wife has been upset at me, it's been out of compassion. Moving right along. People. Chucklehead. I don't know why those words jumped in my mind. No, but you're right. You're right. Good one. Good one. Anything else? Yes.
That your external circumstances are a reflection of your status with God.
Ooh, okay. Well, you guys are deep, deep, deep. I like that. I was thinking on the big picture sense and in the little picture sense, and that kind of includes what you guys are saying. The book of Job, of course, is part of a bigger book. We have to remember, though, that the Bible, though bound together as a single book in our time, is not a single book. It's 66 books. Oh, I was supposed to ask that, especially if anybody was in seminary right now. They would have to answer that correctly. What are the two divisions of all those books? Like two baskets. You have two baskets, and you're putting a bunch of books in. What are the two baskets in the Bible? The Old Testament and New Testament. What's another word for testament? Covenant. There you go, Andrew. The professor saved you, because I was going to ask you. Covenant. Now, being as though there's two covenants, and the covenants in the Bible are between whom? Who and whom? Who and who? Oh my English teacher just rolled over. Who is the covenants between in the Bible? Okay, God and man. Not so much man and man, a little, but mainly God and man. So therefore, that means there has to be a man. Yeah, it's very good. No, it has to be a what? God, right? You have to assume there's a God. And here is part of the questioning. Because the book of Job not only assumes there's a God, but it portrays a God in specific circumstances. It's one thing to speak generally about God in our culture. Maybe you'll get away with that. Maybe if you're general. Wife and I are part of a karate association for about 30 years. We're instructors, and they've asked me a couple times to do the opening prayer at our world championships. 2,000, 3,000 people or something like that. And I would pray in the name of Jesus. Well, the last time I did it, I got pulled to the side and said I shouldn't do that. That I should not be offensive and just say God. I explained that I couldn't do that because my Jesus died for me. How could I then not speak publicly for him? And it didn't hurt that the Grand Master of our association was a Christian when he was alive. And he actually defended that to those that came to him and complained. You see, in the martial arts, it's a little different. When you complain to the Grand Master, there's always the possibility you get push-ups. So, But anyways, no, he didn't do that much. So we're making this specific claim in Job that there's a God. Okay, now that could lead to, this is fiction. But then on the small part, let me ask, why would the account in Job be questioned? Give me some reasons why some might doubt that there really was a person named Job who lived at this time in this place and had these experiences, especially in conversation. Why would they doubt there's a Job? Was a real Job? Okay. Okay, great. Very good. His reaction. Yes. Now the light bulb comes on. Light bulb. I wouldn't do that, because even though I never, ever, ever get upset with God, like, God, what is your timing here? Why aren't you doing things the way I told you would work best? Yeah, I wouldn't be a Job. Right? That's good. Anything else about? Ooh, now we're getting to what I had written down. Why does that matter if it's really, really old?
It seems the farther we get in time from when something is claimed to have happened, the more we question.
Yes, why? You are doing so well. Your professors would be just ecstatic about you up until this point.
I guess credibility, I don't know. And then also there's, if you pick any given point in time, and if the farther you get from that point, the more people and the more mouths that start to try and pick things apart. And so
Yes.
it starts to take away the credibility.
Yes. Yes, you get a 99.998 on that. There is the view that there is no way an ancient book is the same thing the ancient writer wrote. No, by the time it's copied and copied and copied, transmitted, then you transmitted it orally from one generation to the next. Oh, there's no way you got this accurate. Oh, it's absolutely sure it's not the same thing. That's false thinking. Can happen, but it's false thinking. Yes.
Same people that would make that argument would not make that argument against Plato. That we only have 5 extant manuscripts of the works of Plato, none of those within 800 years of his death, and yet no one from the other side of the fence questions whether Plato really wrote those things or said those things.
Right. Even though my professor did say it is easier to read Plato, what Plato wrote, than to read what people say he wrote. Because I have multiple understandings of Plato, and I can't even understand the one he wrote. But you're right. There's this thinking that ancient documents are automatically guilty until proven innocent. They're automatically full of errors until you can prove they're accurate. This is not the way we approach ancient documents. This is not the right way to think. For one, history, the world, even now, there are cultures that excel in oral histories. The ability to pass on something orally, right? For example, they may put things into poetry fashion. In our culture, poetry is seen as what genre? Poetry. No. Fiction, nonfiction. Say fiction. Yes, fiction, thank you. It's seen as not real stuff. It's just some nicey nice things you read to your wife on your anniversary or to get out of trouble, not speaking personally. But I'm always afraid to look back there when I make little comments. People have asked my wife, do you get angry at things your husband says? My wife says, no, I know where he sleeps. So anyways, whew. Okay, yeah, so we covered that. Because it's so old, it must not be the real thing. Well, we... What?
Oh, I was just saying, even in the 1700s, the way they wrote was, kind of weird.
As far as...
Just the way they wrote it. It was like poetry.
Okay, so that goes into part of genre. Yes, writing is different. They did a comparison to the common soldier in the Civil War writing home to his wife, "My dearly beloved, we are bound by this inexorable conflict to resolve the truth of blah, blah, blah." Then they compared the soldiers writing from Desert Storm. "Yo, babe, what's up?" You know, so. No, don't tell that story. No, don't, Kevin. You'll die. It's your anniversary today. You don't want to die. I really want to tell it. What time is it? Can I get away with telling that story? Yes, I can. Okay. So here we were, Christmas. We were on the ramp in Spain. In those days, way, way back, before cell phones, before remote controls on TVs, you had to call on a landline. So when I left in the Air Force on a mission, it'd be a week, 2 weeks, my wife wouldn't hear from me until I got back to base ops. So it was Christmas. So what we did, we got all like 8 of us crew members, we're sitting up on the flight deck, and we have to call an HF radio that bounces off the atmosphere. We got a phone patch to Sweden, a phone patch to the States, then a phone patch to your house. Every guy had his turn, and every single guy's wife got on the phone because it was on a speaker. "I miss you, I love you." My turn.
Your wife is in the military.
Stop. I'm telling the story. She was at work. She was in the military. They connect. My wife goes, "Hello." And I tell her something. She say, "Roger." And all the fellows going, "Ooh, Kevin." My wife is a very, very practical person. Very practical. Why has that anything to do with it? I don't know. That was a rabbit trail. But another thing is, like we said, well, the book of Job should be questioned because it's got God in it. The metaphysical, another realm. And that can't be true. Why can't there be another realm? Another dimension?
Part of my experience.
Very good, Andrew. You're killing it today, man. I mean, if I was your professor, I'd give you a week off from homework, but I don't think it'll do any good. Right, naturalism. This is all there is. This is all there is. There can't be anything else, and that's considered default. You don't need to prove it, it just is. One guy said to me, "We don't need to talk about what started the universe because the universe just is." The universe just is? That's like saying the supercomputer my wife used to, it just is. No one built it. We don't need to know how it was built, how it was designed. It just is. Costs millions of dollars, but just is. But the question is, why can't there be a God? And this went to the other series, but we're not going to it. The existence of God is not illogical, irrational, incoherent. It actually does follow those things. And if you don't agree with me, contact me. We'll have a discussion. If you have really hard questions, I'll pawn you off to my friend. But if there can be a God, then why can't there be a devil? If there can be a metaphysical realm, another realm where there exists a God, then there can exist a devil. If there can be a God, why can't there be angels and demons? Yes, there is nothing illogical about that, unless you embrace naturalism. But the question would then come up, is God culpable for the existence of Satan and the demons? Is he responsible for them? That's a good question, which we're going to attempt to cover in this class. But let's go over the facts behind the book of Job. Well, you didn't answer that. No, you got to come back to the other classes. So let's go over some facts on the book of Job. She just drives her nuts. 39 years driving her nuts, and she still keeps me. Yay! Okay, the author. Like some books of the Bible, we don't know who the author of Job is, but it has Job's name on it. Didn't he write it? That would seem like an assumption, but that's not true in biblical cases. Because even the Gospels, when they have their name on top of the Gospel, that wasn't there in the original Greek writing. Those were added, I forget which version. Sorry. But like the numbers of verses and the little paragraph titles, that wasn't in. Originally, Greek, and I believe Hebrew, is run on. Run on. And they sometimes have to struggle to figure out what's a word, or is it this part, and all those things. And then Hebrew added little dots to make the Hebrew students' life even more miserable. So, anyway, so the author, we don't know really who wrote it. Some have suggested Elihu, if I said that right, in the book of Job, or Moses, or Solomon could have wrote it. We have to remember that unlike our culture, the passing down of histories and doing it accurately was a successful and common ability that I said earlier. So if it's a later time, that does not, it's full of errors. No, that does not necessarily mean that. They, excuse me, like I said, they even have used poetry to help people remember. This is where the Christian creeds have come from, to help you remember things, to clarify things. Creeds have gotten a bad name in the church because on one hand say, it's not scripture. I'm not reading or studying anything that's not scripture. Well, that's not the right approach to take, right? So poetry, in fact, my professor pointed out that the first 2 chapters of Job are narrative, like documentary, and all the other chapters are poetic. Yes?
Professor, ask you a question.
Yes, as long as it's not hard.
How do you deal with James 5:11 then, in light of what you just said? We count those blessed who endured. You have heard of the endurance of Job and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealing. So how do you, in the light of saying that Job was not the author of the book, how do you deal with something like James 5:11 and attributes it to Job and talks about Job as a real person?
Wait, is it actually attributing?
No, it's not. But it says you've heard of the endurance of Job and seen the compassion of the Lord's dealing. So it could be that he's talking about the story, but
Right. So, and I think, thank you for rescuing me. You get 2 weeks off. But,
no, I just took 2 weeks away from you.
I have it next semester.
oh, you too? Don't ever challenge him again. Don't ever. Okay, but anyways, yes. Ezekiel, I believe, also talks about Job, like Jesus talked about Jonah. So we have this credibility. So these people were assumed to really exist. But that, again, doesn't necessarily mean who wrote it, but that should not in of itself leave us to think that Job is not a real event, just because someone else wrote it.
References in Ezekiel, so those are the 3 outside the book of Job.
Right. So,
We know Job didn't write it because the whole purpose of the book was to show his physical situation had nothing to do with whether he was righteous or not. Because in chapter 1, if Job was right and he already knew that divine narrative, if he knew that narrative about
yeah.
then there would be no question. There would be no.
Well, he could have wrote it
There
afterwards.
would be no question.
It's like,
No, whether he
No, I don't.
He would still know from the outset that God called him a righteous man and then told Satan to have his way with him.
Andrew, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ponder that. And you lose a week. I'm sorry. But the question is, why is the bulk of Job in poetic form? Does that make it non-true? And that is the question, and I think I answered that. The answer is no, that doesn't make it not true just because it's in poetic form. The book of Psalms were written in that genre. It's not the same genre, right? But there's references in Psalms to real people. We don't doubt they exist. Well, most of us don't. Okay. One commentator said that the book of Job has two different tones in it. In the beginning, it's about Job being defended against accusations of wrongdoing, but in the bulk or the rest of Job, it's God rebuking him for his pride. So therefore, since you have these two different basic ideas, that means it came from two different sources, the commentator said. Well, that's not especially true in and of itself, but even if it was two different sources, that does not mean it didn't happen. In fact, the more people who attest to something, the more likely you are to believe that it happened, right? Parents, have you ever had did you know of a parent, another parent, who had a child who answered in a story that was so unbelievable and that exonerated them, right? Not you, your children, no, but other people's children. But what if their friends were there and they attested to what he was saying? Would you have been more likely to believe them? Or did you pull out the mom card and guilty? Psh. I think testimony from others, unless it's perfect. If your child and all their friends say exact same story, what does that lead you to believe? Rehearsed. And that's where the beauty of the mom comes in. You know, the ability to discern sin, just cut through. I just couldn't understand how my wife just knew when it was a lie. I'm like, well, maybe. And she just knew. She just knew. So that would lead one to think one should not cheat on one's wife if she is so discerning, because you'll get caught eventually. Or as my wife says, I know where you sleep. The date of Job. Well, unlike the author, the dating is a different matter. The events of the book of Job could have taken place around the time of Abraham. This is one theory, which is called the patriarchal period. It's based on things like Job's lifespan of 140 years. That's in verse 42 to 16. The economy of livestock, verse 1-3. And Job was a priest of his family, chapter 1, verse 5. And the absence of any reference to the Mosaic law, the idea of Israel as a nation. So this gives us a good idea of the dating. Not exactly, but a good idea. My thought is, when we examine it in that way, to that detail, that thinking, doesn't that help support the idea that it's true? Because mythology doesn't get caught up in verification and cohesion of facts. Mythology just kind of sits there. The theme of Job, and here I think is a very relevant thing for our time. The book of Job wrestles with the age-old question that is also in our time, is why do the righteous suffer if God is loving and merciful? That's the question, the theme of the book. Why do good people suffer? I'm your servant, Lord. I belong to you, and these bad things are happening to me. This isn't right. I will tell you, I have thought that, maybe for a couple seconds, but I still had that impulse. I'm not supposed to suffer, Lord. Right? I will confess, when my wife got cancer, I didn't think that, and I was amazed I didn't. I thought, this is not like me. I thought I would be angry with God. I wasn't. But here's the theme of Job. Why do the righteous suffer? So it's not only a theological question to be answered, but it's a personal question. If I took a poll, I bet you at least half your hands would go up about who here has suffered significantly, greatly. Either someone who's a spouse or a mother or a child, especially a child, and they have gone through agony. I bet you half your hands would go up. So, in the few minutes we got left, let's just jump into the beginning of Job, leave all the facts and the stuff behind the background, and actually dig in. So Job 1:1 says in the ASV that man, Job, was perfect and upright. Perfect. Wait a minute. I thought only God was perfect. How could the book of Job say that he was perfect and upright? What do you think? I love how you guys are thinking. I just love that. Love it. Let me help just a little. Does anybody have a version, the Holman version, the ESV, or the NASB, or the NIV version? What did you have, Andrew?
You're talking about the verse where it talks about him being blameless?
Yeah. Which version is that?
The ESV.
The ESV. It says what? Man was
Job, and that man was blameless and upright.
blameless. Blameless. But isn't only God blameless? Anybody have any other versions?
Mine says, he was blameless, a man of complete integrity.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. The Holman says a man of a perfect integrity. The NASB says that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. The NIV says man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. So let me ask, with these different translations, what is the purpose of a translation? To allow Christians to fight and bicker with one another. Yes. No. Sorry. That was a joke. What is the purpose of a translation?
Hopefully to understand better.
Very good. Yes. This is a controversial, is it a standalone document? As in, all I need is my particular translation and I'm good to go, and that's all I need to know. Is that the proper way to think about a translation? What do you think?
Where most of us start.
Most of us start. Thank you for honesty. Yes. And I can understand why we would feel that way. But my thinking is the purpose of a translation is to get you, the non-Greek speaker, the non-Hebrew speaker, as close to the original language as possible. Because we know you can't directly translate things, another language. You miss something. In fact, I taught that translations come in different versions. Those that try and be as direct as possible, and those that try to give you the essence of what was meant, because we know in language there is communication. I'm trying to think of an example other than the one I usually use. Okay, I'll say it. I'm not the pastor. I can get away with things, kind of. When you say, she's a brick house, you don't mean...
She might be mighty.
I remember the time I said to my wife, yo, baby, you're hot. My kids went, oh, Dad, stop, Dad, no. Yes, so translators try to use wording to give you the meaning. Like when Jesus said, Joe, 3 days and 3 nights. Hey, we're literalists, so we take everything absolutely. Well, that's not quite what Hebrewisms meant. So when we use these different translations, we're trying to get an idea what the author of Job meant when he said Job was blameless or he was perfect. And I don't believe he was saying that Job was without sin. And I had the question, is it possible as a Christian to live without sinning? And the short, I like that confidence. You know, you lost your other week. But the answer is yes, you can live a sinless life in theory. But I don't think it's very likely at all. At least in my life, no way, Jose. But what did that have to do with it? Oh, so Job was talking about Job's integrity, his practice, the type of man he was. Do you know anybody that fits that bill? Do you know anybody in your life? Now, you know they may not have been sinless, but boy, they sure seem to set the mark. They seem to be on fire. They just didn't lie. They just didn't steal. Do you know a Christian like that? Someone you can look up to? Not make them God, but someone you can use as a role model? That's the type of person Job was. Fellas, fathers, wouldn't you just die to have your kids think that of you? Remember, we'll end with this. My one daughter, we were in church once, and she looked up at me and she said, gee, Dad, you must really love God. I was like, right, oh, there went the microphone. That went right into me. But it wasn't like this, it was like, whoa. Oh man, if that's the image she's getting from me, oh, thank God for that. Thank God for that. Father, we thank you that you've communicated to us. You didn't just create us and then take off for the mountains, but you've given us revelation, both in nature and even more importantly, in prophetic and written form, and communicated us by men and women of God. Let us look into Job and to take heart with it. Let us learn the lesson that Job had to learn. And let us be inspired to be the type of person where someone would say, wow, they're a person of integrity. In Jesus' name, amen.